What's going on, everyone? Dots Gaming here, and today I'm bringing you guys a different kind of build video. No, this is not going to be a build video showcasing what I'm using, what I'm running, and how to have my setup. This is going to be instead a how-to build video, because in the recent weeks and months, I have seen a lot more people having issues with putting builds together. I can't tell you how many times I will get a message about one of my builds and people saying that they're having trouble with it. And when I go to help that individual out, figure out what's wrong and why it's not working for them, I realize that they're missing a lot of key components to what makes a build work, which to me just shows a misunderstanding of what putting a build together even requires. That, you know, missing such a thing wouldn't be obvious to people. So what I want to do with today's video is show you guys the different pieces that go into making a build in the Elder Scrolls Online, and show you guys what you need to look out for when putting a build together for yourself. This is going to be applicable for tanks, healers, DPS, everybody. This is going to be just something to keep in mind when putting builds together. PvP, PvE. I just want to help you guys realize what all the basic pieces are so you know what to look for when you're putting your build together. So, really quick, guys, actually, before we hop into this, I do want to mention that we are partnered with Gamigo, who is working with the Eden Reforestation Project to help work directly with towns and villages suffering from deforestation and destruction of their land that sustains them, to help replant trees in their area. The great thing about this is that the Eden Reforestation Project is handling all of the planting of the trees, working with the local villagers in the area suffering from deforestation to help employ them, to help not only get these trees planted, but help save the environment. So guys, if you do want to get some Gamigo games as well as support the Eden Reforestation Project, you'll also get some free items in these games if you do support the project. Please feel free to click the link in the description below. It'll help support the channel, help support the environment, and all the money will be going towards a great cause. So without further ado, let's get into the rest of the video. We're going to start off with one basic thing, and that is CP 300. It's a really important principle to understand when putting a build together. So from champion point 10 to champion point 160, as you gain those CP points, you are still gaining stats. You know, I know that 1 to 50, you gain skill points every level, but once you hit champion points, you start just gaining champion points, and you're putting those in your CP trees. And, you know, you might be thinking that that's all the bonuses that you're getting, but it's not true. Up until CP 300, you're gaining stats based off of the color of the CP that you gain. So if you're getting a red CP point, you're also getting some health, blue, magicka, green, stamina. So making sure that your CP is at least CP 300 is a very important thing. Also, you want to make sure on your character, we're going to kind of do some of the overarching things first, that you are using buff food. Can't tell you how many times I've had people come to my comment section, Dots, this is my build without buff food. That doesn't matter. Like, build without buff food is not a build. Buff food is 100% mandatory to use on every build in ESO. If you don't have it, it's not a build. And the good thing is that a lot of buff foods in the game are relatively cheap. I'm going to list some ones right now that I would keep an eye out for. You have Dubious Camoran Throne. You have Witch Mother's Potent Brew, Lava Foot Soup and Saltreese. You have Ghastly Eyeball, Longfin Pasty with Melon Sauce, Braised Rabbit and Spring Vegetables. And there is another one that you use for magicka. Let me just pull it up. And Mistral Banana Bunny Hash. Now, which food you want to use is going to depend on what type of content you're doing, what your specific build is, etc. But those are some of the best buff foods in the game. I know that there are a couple of better ones, but they're really, really expensive. And odds are, if you are watching this video, you probably are not going to be wanting to spend money on those buff foods. So these are your good, cheaper alternatives that are going to be really good. And I still use a lot of these on my characters. The only difference between these and the gold foods that you see a lot of people use is like a tiny bit more stats or some more health recovery. But for you, that that little tiny extra bit is not going to be, in my opinion, worth the price difference. So buff food, very, very important. The next thing we want to make sure that we have is a Munda Stone. Having a Munda Stone is incredibly important. Now, a Munda Stone is basically like a standing stone from Skyrim. It's just you can have one of these active at all times unless you're wearing a certain set that lets you have two. But for the 99% of the player base, you're going to only have one Mundus active at a time. There are a variety of different Munda Stones in the game, and what you're going to want to use is going to depend on your class and role. I have an entire guide dedicated to Munda Stones on my website, dotsgaming.com. So if you want to look at which Mundus is best for you and what you're going to be doing, I would go check that guide out. But making sure you have this is extremely important. Now, the next thing to check, obviously, is make sure that you have your attributes placed. This guy is a little bit different. This is a PvP build, so I have lava foot food, so I want to make sure to have a little bit of extra health to make up for the health I'm not gaining from this buff food. So, you know, in general, though, you just want to make sure that you have all of your points into stamina if you're playing a stamina DPS, all of your points into magicka if you're playing a magicka DPS or a healer, or if you're playing a tank, kind of split between the three based off of what's needed for your particular build. Your goal is to have your health at least 35k, in my opinion, and you're going to want just your stamina to be higher than your magicka pool so that if you use certain synergies that restore your highest resource, you're getting stamina restoration and not magicka restoration. The specific numbers are going to depend on your build, race, enchants, a lot of different factors, but I just wanted to mention some of those specific numbers just to keep them in mind. Now we kind of got some of the background stuff, also making sure you have a good race, very, very important. Again, race is going to depend on your build, what you're doing, and again, I do have a racial passives guide on my website as well, again, dotsgaming.com, so if you guys want to see what race is best for what you're doing, feel free to check that out. But having a good race is definitely going to help a lot. Now that we have a lot of the overarching stuff set up, you know, that's a lot of the background stuff, we need to start looking at gear. Okay, gear is obviously a huge important thing when it comes to making a build. Now, you want to make sure that you have good traits for your build. So if you're PvPing, make sure that you have crit resist and impen on. Now, if you're watching this video post Greymore, you are going to get some crit resistance at a base for PvP, but impen is still going to be a good trait if you would like to pad that crit resist a little bit more. Do remember, guys, that impen is really a PvP only trait. Mobs in the overlands and in dungeons do not crit, so critical resistance will do nothing for you there. You know, you're going to want to use different traits like divines if you're a DPS or a healer. If you're a tank, you want to look into sturdy for block cost reduction or infused, but making for more resources on your large pieces. You know, since you get the most enchant value on, like, let's say your head, shoulders, or excuse me, your head, chest, and legs, you're going to want to infuse those pieces for your tank because you're going to get the most return out of increasing that enchant as opposed to a small enchant on your gloves or something. You're not going to want to increase that by a certain percentage because it's going to end up being a smaller return. So again, making sure that your traits are good is obviously important, and making sure that all of your pieces are enchanted is very important. So, you know, for example, for PvP, the general rule of thumb is I like to do tri-stat glyphs on my big pieces. Again, most return out of those. If I was to put these on a small piece, I'd only get like maybe 170 of each value as opposed to big piece. I'm getting 400 something. And then if you're stamina DPS, you're going to want to do stamina small pieces and magicka small pieces if you're a magicka DPS. For doing stam DPS or mag DPS, on the other hand, in PvE, you're going to want to do either all stam enchants or all magicka enchants. Now, if you find your health to be a little low, let's say your health is below like 16k or something, do not be afraid to stick a health glyph on your big piece, like on one of your big pieces, like your helmet or your chest. I do that on some of my builds because a dead DPS does no DPS. And if your health is too low, you're going to get one shot by mechanics if you make a mistake, and you're going to be laying on the ground and people are going to have to res you. And now that takes two people out of the fight because you're dead and now somebody has to res you. So making sure that you have enough health for your build is extremely important. If you're a tank, again, your enchants are going to vary way more based off of your race and stuff, but a cool rule of thumb that I would maybe keep in mind is, again, tri-stat on the big pieces because you're going to be infusing those, and then health on the small pieces. Another thing to consider also is gear weights. If you are a stamina DPS, you want to make sure to have at least 5 pieces of medium to get all of your medium armor passive benefits. If you're a a magicka character, whether you're a healer or DPS, you want to make sure to have 5 pieces of light on to make sure that you get the magicka bonuses. If you're a tank, you want to make sure to have 5 pieces of heavy on to get your heavy armor bonuses. So making sure that you have an appropriate number of gear pieces per weight on your character based off of your goals is very important. Now, whether you want to do what you want to do with your last 2 pieces is going to be totally up to you, and going to be very build dependent. I'm not going to get into that in this video because that's going to be, I think, a little too deep. But what you want to do with those other 2 pieces is totally up to you. For the general public, I'd recommend 5-1-1, which is going to be 5 of your primary weight, which I just went over, and then 1 piece of the other weight. So either like 5 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy, 5 medium, 1 heavy, 1 light, or 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium. Just a general rule of thumb. I think that will be good for you guys to follow. And I'll explain why that's important in a second. So we've gone over traits. We've gone over enchants. Now, I want to cover rarity, so purple quality, gold quality, because there is so much misinformation about gear rarity, and I want to dispel it here. The only gear, in my opinion, that 100% absolutely mandatorily needs to be gold is your weapons. Golding your weapons is by far the most important thing that you can do. I see so many people get so concerned when they're like, oh, but Dots, you know, I don't have all gold gear and I'm not going to do as much damage as somebody. And, you know, it's going to be I'm going to be such a disadvantage. I need to save up. That's why I'm not doing the amount of DPS that I'm doing. I can tell you guys that even like me, when I play, I very, very seldomly play with a fully set of golden gear. I make a lot of builds. I change a lot of things up a lot just to kind of mess around and, you know, just kind of have fun and experiment with different setups. And if I was to gold out every piece of gear that I ever touched in this game, I would never have any money, especially when you take into account the fact that, you know, Zos likes to balance things with a very, very firm fist. You will, I think, lose your sanity if you constantly try to, you know, always gold out your gear and you know, constantly, you know, you spend money on that. I typically will only gold out gear if I'm using like a set for like a long time. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, you've explained to me why you don't gold gear. Why do you gold weapons? So when you golding gear doesn't give you the huge, like the biggest return, right? You're gonna get a little bit more from your trait impen, right? You're gonna get a little bit more from your set bonuses, and you're gonna get a little bit more armor value. But it's a really small percentage for the amount of money that you're spending, okay? But when it comes to your weapons, huge difference. Huge difference. For non-Nirnhoned 1H weapons, we are talking 200 damage. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but that damage that you see, so Maul of Hunting's Rage, damage 1806, that gets put directly into my weapon damage and my spell damage pool, okay? So if I don't have this gold, I will be missing a significant portion of damage. Like I said, on a one-handed weapon, it's 200. If I do a two-handed weapon, let me do the two-handed values real quick. So a two-handed, let's say non-Nirnhoned, is going to give you 1571 weapon damage, but on a epic quality, which is purple, what did I just say? I said 1571. And then on a purple quality, you're going to get 1332. It's a big difference. It's a big difference. Okay. And like I said, that's going straight into your damage pool, magicka or spell damage or weapon damage, obviously, depending on your weapon type. And then that also is going to get boosted by key buffs in your build. So missing out on gold weapons really, really is going to hurt you in the damage department. So again, that's why golding weapons is extremely important, but do not get trapped into thinking you need to gold out the rest of your gear. You absolutely do not need to, okay? The only other thing I'd recommend golding out besides weapons is your enchants on like big pieces or jewelry, because you get a lot of return, at least in my opinion, from golding out your enchants on your jewelry and big gear pieces. The small pieces, again, if we look at an example, right, I have 351 on this and 324 on that. So like, it's like 30 stam, you know, it's really not that big of a deal. But on your bigger pieces and your jewelry, that return, in my opinion, is worth golding the enchants. Same for the weapons. So hopefully I kind of dispelled some myths about golding items, why it might or might not be worth it. Now, the next thing that we want to do is skills. So I'm not going to get too crazy with skills here, as that's going to vary wildly based off of your class and your role. But you want to make sure that you have certain buffs in your skill loadout. If you're PvPing, you want to make sure that you have a source of major resolve. You're going to be really, really squishy if you don't have a source of major resolve in your build. If you're playing any sort of damage dealer for any content, you want to make sure that you have one of two buffs depending on your resource. If you're stamina, you want to have major brutality. And if you're magicka, you want to have major sorcery. As you can see, that is a 20% damage increase simply having that buff up. You need to make sure that you have that at all times. If you're healing, having major sorcery is also important too, because it'll help buff up your spell damage, make your heals stronger. If you're a tank, not as important, obviously, but as a tank, even in PvE, you're going to want to make sure to have a source of major resolve. For your damage dealers, not as important for PvE content. This is more of a PvP buff or like a solo PvE buff, but it is extremely important for tanks because you get a significant portion of armor for it. Now, another important thing to have while you are DPSing is a crit buff. So if you are or even if you're healing. If you're stamina, you're looking for major savagery. If you're magicka, you are looking for major prophecy. So getting that buff from somewhere is extremely important. Now, speaking of potions, potions are something that should also be looked at as something that you can get buffs that you need from. So for example, on this particular build, I don't have a source of major savagery on my skills, so I choose to get it from a potion. Another important thing to take into account is major endurance, or I believe it's major intellect. So if you're playing a stam character, getting major endurance, which is going to increase your stamina recovery by 20%, very important. It's going to give you a lot of sustain. If you're a magicka or healer, you're looking at major intellect. If you're a tank, you're going to want to use tri-stat pots, which give you fortitude, as you can see here, which is the health recovery, endurance for the stam recovery, and intellect for the magicka recovery. So you're going to get all different recoveries. And I want to go over one last thing, and that is champion point jump points. I'll actually do CP jump points first. So if you don't know, guys, I have a chart on my website for CP jump points. So I get asked all the time, Dots, I'm not CP 810. How should I place my CP? And when I tell people to proportionally place their CP, while adhering to jump points, they look at me like I have 6 heads. So what I mean by that, guys, place your points proportionally while adhering to jump points. So for example, I have 23 into Blessed and 81 into Master at Arms. Just using these two CP as an example. So early on, because 81 is a much bigger number than 23, I am going to go harder with my earlier points into Master at Arms first, and then eventually start going into Blessed a little bit, since I proportionally put way more points into Master at Arms. Now, what is a jump point? A jump point can simply be explained as a whole number for a CP. Very straightforward. So if we do 1 point into Master at Arms, it says 0.5%. would be increased, your direct damage attacks would be increased by. ESO rounds down to the nearest whole number. So technically this is 0%. If I do 2 points, 1%, now I've gained something. Now my direct damage attacks deal 1% more damage. 1.49%, still 1%, still rounds down. Once we get 4, 1.97%, really close to 2, but not 2, so it's actually still 1% in the eye of the game. Bam. Now 5 is a jump point. Now that we've passed 2% to 2.45%, we are now actually gaining 2% increase from Master at Arms. So as you can see, that is how jump points work. So when I say proportionally while adhering to jump points, I mean place them, for example, like I said, 81 into Master at Arms, 23 into Blessed. You're going to want to go more heavy into Master at Arms at first, but making sure you hit those whole numbers so that you actually are gaining value. Now, the last thing that you guys want to take into account besides buffs and skills and everything is passives. You can only have so many skills on your skill bar in ESO. So a significant portion of your power is going to come from passives. And I get asked all the time, what passives do I need? You always need passives that are relevant to what you're doing. So I use skills from all of my class skill lines. So I need all of my class passives. I am on this build using a two-hander and a bow. So I need all the two-handed passives, all the bow passives. I am using 5 pieces of medium and 2 pieces of heavy. So I need all the medium passives and the heavy armor passives that don't require me to wear 5 pieces of gear since I'm only wearing 2. I am also not using any Fighters Guild skills, so I don't need a Fighters Guild passives. I don't need Mages Guild passives. I am using Temporal Guard on my back bar. So having some relevant Sigil Order passives, reduce cost, gives me a block shield. Nice to have. Undaunted is the big kahuna of passives IMO. Okay, whenever people tell you to use a 5-1-1, it's because of this passive right here, Undaunted Metal. Increase your maximum health, stamina, and magic up by 2% per armor type worn, heavy, medium, light that you have equipped. So if you have 3 different armor types, 5 medium, 1 heavy, 1 light, that's 3, you're going to be gaining 6% additional stats on everything. Really, really big boost to get this. I have a guide on my YouTube channel on how to level up Undaunted. Definitely go check that out if you are confused on how to level this up. If you PvP, having your Alliance War, very incredibly important to have leveled. Obviously, you want your racial passives. And then finally, for any build, you want to have your Alchemy to 50 so that you can use 3 of medicinal use. When using potions, resulting effects last 30% longer. Now, what this means is that if you look at my weapon critical buff, potions have 45-second cooldown. And having 3 times medicinal use gives me 47.6 seconds on my potion buffs, which means that they will have 100% uptime. Without our buff from the alchemy skill line, these would not have 100% uptime, which would be a huge downside to our build. Okay, so I actually do have a guide, guys, called the Complete Crafting Guide on my YouTube channel, and I go over what all the crafting professions are and how to level up the individual ones. So I would go and check that out, and it will explain to you how to level up alchemy very cheaply to 50 in like less than 20 minutes. It's really, really quick. All right, guys, I know I just threw a ton of information at you because there is a lot to consider when making a build. But like I said, my goal was just to give you guys stuff to think about, stuff to consider when you're putting a build together and you're trying to understand, what you might be missing and what you need to look at and what's important to have on your character. I wanted to just kind of cover that today in this video and explain what you should be looking for when making a build. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I know sometimes I do have a bad habit of talking a little fast, especially when it comes to a topic that I'm passionate about, which is building an ESO. So please feel free to leave any comments below, any questions that you have. One more thing I do want to toss in, though, guys, before the end of this video, a little bonus mention, is armor weights. So when it comes to armor weights and the importance of them, for any given gear weight, your chest is going to give you the most bonus. And then coming behind chest is going to be head, shoulders, legs, and boots. Those all give the same armor value. And then following that is gloves, and following that is a belt. So when you're doing your 5-1-1, let's say that it's not like a specifically light armor set. You want your chest to be heavy when possible, and then either your head, shoulders, legs, and boots to be medium, just so that you get the most armor value out of it. And if you're a tank, you want your belt to be light and your gloves to be medium again, just to get the most amount of armor value. So just a little extra tip there. But I know there's a lot to consider, and I know that if you're a new player listening to this, your head's probably spinning a little bit, but watch this video a couple times. If you haven't already, watch my complete beginner guide. It has a boatload of information in it, and understanding what I just talked about in this video, you don't have to understand everything that I explained right now, but understanding the importance of a lot of the things that I talked about and what role they play in making a build. And just if you're if you're following one of my builds or a different creator's build and you're looking at it and you're like, man, I feel like I'm missing something, you'll know after watching this what you need to go look at. Like, okay, maybe I don't have some right traits. Maybe I'm missing my Munda Stone. Maybe my weapons aren't gold quality. You'll know what to go look at so that you can find out what you're missing and help you start to perfect the builds that you're trying out. And then eventually, once you experiment enough, you'll be able to start trying to put together builds of your own. So guys, if you found this video helpful, if you found this educational, I would really appreciate if you left a like on it and shared it with your friends. If you know somebody who could benefit from this, please do not hesitate to leave any questions below. I love answering questions about building and builds, so I will be happy to help however I can. And if you guys like this video, I would appreciate if you hit the sub button as well as the bell to keep notifications on to follow the content I put here on my YouTube channel. So thank you guys for stopping by. I very much appreciate it. As always, I'm Dots Gaming, and I'll see you all in the next one.